Welcome back to Iowa in Focus. This week we're joined with Democratic presidential candidate and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. So, Secretary Clinton, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be back.
If we could just start with, here in Dubuque, the new Quinnipiac poll numbers are out now. And it has Bernie Sanders up now by 5. That's a swing from last December. What does that say about the whole 2016 campaign? We spoke back in the summer until now. Has all that work kind of gone for naught now that
no. In fact, polls go up, polls go down. You really just have to stay focused on reaching as many Iowans as you can, and that's what I'm doing. And I didn't pay attention when they had me up. I'm not paying attention when there's a different outcome. I think we just have to keep talking about what the differences are between me and the Republicans, what the substantive differences are with my opponents in the Democratic process. So I feel very good about what we've done because we've built a terrific organization that works hard every day, and I'm going to keep working as hard as I can to reach as many people as possible.
Sure. Looking into kind of a little bit some of those numbers, things like trustworthy numbers, Sanders tends to do better, but in terms of who people think can win in November and leadership and especially foreign affairs, you tend to do a lot better there. Is that enough to carry, having that kind of what seems like the more presidential numbers? You've always led in that from early on.
I think that caucus goers here in Iowa are really starting to ask themselves the hard questions about who they want to see president and who could become president. Who can the Democrats, starting in the caucus, really send on the way to the nomination? Because look, the most important thing is that we don't let the Republicans have the White House in January of 2017. So I think if people are focusing on how high the stakes are and how complicated the job is, you've got to do so many things at once, and it does take a variety of experiences and skills to be able to fulfill that list of complex challenges. I think people will decide more and more to caucus for me.
The ad that's rolling right now through Iowa is incredible, and so it's the one where you kind of ask, or the ad rather asks, can you believe what these guys are saying? Is that kind of rhetoric that we're hearing through this campaign, from people like Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, an indictment more of the party, that's who they're sending out and that's who's leading, or the voters, that's who they say or they're telling pollsters they want to get behind?
That's really going to have to be left up to those who participate in the Republican process. But I think a lot of Americans, including Republicans, are concerned by the kind of rhetoric that we're hearing out of the candidates on the other side. And I think because the stakes are so high, voters need to zero in right now and try to imagine if we ended up with Donald Trump being sworn in as president, Ted Cruz being sworn in as president. Really, what would that mean for our country? What would that mean for our standing in the world? What would that mean for our economy? And we sure wouldn't get an economy that produced rising incomes for middle-class people. We'd get massive tax cuts for the wealthiest among us. So if people start to really look at what's down the road, then I think the caucus goer knows what a heavy responsibility he or she has.
As one of the Democratic candidates, you're in a tough spot to try to kind of carry that message, though. Whose responsibility is it to kind of show voters on both sides, even voters who would vote just in a general election, who might be in the middle and undecided, how serious that kind of thing might be?
Well, I do think it's part of my responsibility because if the stakes are as high as I think they are, and many voters tell me they believe they are, then we have to think about how we nominate the strongest possible candidate to go up against whoever the Republicans decide to put up. I think I'm prepared, ready, battle-scarred to take on whoever the Republicans nominate. It will be a tough, tough election. Let's not, think otherwise, because it's going to be a very hard-fought general election, and the Republicans desperately want the White House back, so they're going to, just pull out every stop to make that happen. I'm prepared now. I will be prepared then if I'm given the support of people starting in the caucus here in Iowa on February 1st to really take them on and demonstrate clearly that they should not be our president.
Joe Biden told CNN that it was new for you talking about workers sharing in the profits of their corporations in the context of Bernie Sanders had been talking about it longer. Is that fair, comparing you to a guy who's been in in Congress in one way or another since 1991?
Well, the vice president's a great friend of mine, and I have the utmost respect for him. He went on to say, I have very thoughtful economic policies. And, I've been doing this work and making this case for a really long time. I have worked on the problem of inequality in our education system, our healthcare system. I have worked really hard both in the not-for-profit world as well as the public sector to make a difference, to try to help people, empower them, give them the tools to rise and have better opportunities. So I have a long record of that. And I think maybe what he was talking about is that during my 4 years as Secretary of State, of course I didn't comment on domestic policy. That's not appropriate. But I've had a long record, and I have been in favor of getting the wealthy to pay their fair share and sharing profits and raising incomes, and that's what I'll do as president.
On to the executive action about guns. You've clearly said that you're behind it. A lot of the Republican candidates are against it, but the actual actions themselves don't change really at all who's actually allowed to own guns. It's much more about the process. Do you feel like the criticism is much more on using executive actions regardless of the content than it is actual gun control?
Kevin, I look at it differently. See, when we finally passed the Brady bill, which Senator Sanders opposed, he voted against it 5 times. And when it finally became law, my husband signed it. We know that more than 2 million, maybe as many as 2.4 million purchases have been stopped because of a background check. So I can't sit here and say how many murders or woundings or suicides or accidents might have happened. I know we have 33,000 deaths right now, but we know we stopped purchases that should not have been allowed. So what happened in the last 20 years, more purchases moved to gun shows, more moved to online sales. What the president's trying to do is to say, look, if you're in the business of selling guns, you need to do a background check, and we need to put more resources into making sure the background check works. And we have to, I got the endorsement of the Brady campaign today, we have to understand that it's a relatively small number of gun sellers who sell, frankly, most of the guns that end up being used for crimes. That's why the vote that was taken in 2005 to grant liability protection to gun makers and sellers is so damaging, because it took away a main tool to go after the kind of reckless and negligent acts from makers and sellers. I voted against that. Bernie Sanders voted for it. It's another big difference between us.
Is it fair, on an issue like this that has so much nuance to it within the details, is it fair for the president to have a litmus test where he says, if you don't support this, I won't come out and campaign for you?
Look, I think the president feels incredibly strongly and personally, as we saw in his press conference. I, like him, have had to go to too many families who've lost loved ones to gun violence, to listen to them, to try to find some words to say when they've lost a child or a husband or a parent. And I think, like me, the president is just tired of it. It's enough. We've got to take action. Look, we're an amazing country. For heaven's sakes, we can have common sense gun safety measures and respect the Second Amendment. In fact, we have to, because right now too many people are dying. And so the president wants to make this a voting issue. So do I. I said that early on in my campaign. I kept coming back to it because I feel so strongly every time I hear the story of the toddler getting shot here in Dubuque. Come on, we can do better than that, and we have to do better.
But is making it a voting issue and making it I won't come out unless you sign on to this wholeheartedly, is that going a step too far? Is that not allowing for enough disagreement even within the Democratic tent?
Well, I think you'd have to address that to the president. But if anything else, we're killing 33,000 Americans a year. Look, you have a right to travel. You have a right to be mobile in America, but we still have speed limits. We still have safety belts, because when I was growing up, there were a lot of people who were dying. So we've tried to reduce the numbers. If you buy food and it makes you sick, if you have a toy that injures your child, you have recourse, and you can say, wait a minute, you hurt my child, I don't want you to hurt anybody else. And I think at some point, guns can't be sacrosanct. We have to combine our concern for the Second Amendment with our concern for human life.
Secretary Clinton, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good to see you.